Anytime you're ready then.
Okay. Mark, let's talk a little bit about being a fan. That's something that you and I have in common. I'm talking about being a sports fan.
Absolutely.
I think that you're into that, right?
Is there any other?
That's right, a fan of sports. I think that word comes from fanatic, if I'm not mistaken, one who gets really carried away about sports.
Sounds like me.
Really gets into it. That fits you, yeah. When did you get started, like going to sporting events? And
some of my early memories were of my father taking me to Comiskey Park, the old Comiskey Park on the south side of Chicago. I'm not very old, but I do remember not having expressways to get there and having to go up US 41 through Hammond and South Chicago from our home in Gary, and always seemed to take an excruciatingly long period of time to maneuver through the stop-and-go lights to get there. And always on the way back, we would stop at a White Castle in Whiting, and we would feast ourselves after gorging ourselves on all the hot dogs and the Pepsi at the ballpark.
You know, I think a lot of people who think of themselves as sports fans these days probably have precisely those kind of memories, that they got started somewhere along the line with a parent taking them to games and having all little touches about it. I mean, I can remember things like that. It was always a question of, like, where you parked for the game. If you went up to Tiger Stadium, there was a certain way you went. I went with my dad and get into the ballpark, and there's a whole ambiance around the event, as you were suggesting, you know, where you stop, how you go there, and the sort of flavor that the thing has. I think many people who are sports fans have memories like that.
A lot of times we would pack sandwiches and so forth. My father usually would not tell us when we were going prior to the day. Almost always would go on double-header days so we could get a little more out of our money, good Scottish background. And so we would pack these sandwiches. My mother would stay at home. She didn't like baseball. That was fine with us. So my brothers and I, three brothers, and my father would drive up. A long drive, and probably why I never became a Cubs fan, because it was so far without expressways to get to the north side. You were talking another, in those days, maybe another hour and a half to get there. So I've only been to Wrigley Field a couple of times.
Now you were dealing with the big time in those days. I mean, you're going to the major league ballparks. I mean, growing up in the city of Toledo, I used to go to the Mud Hens games, and that had a little different flavor to it, at Old Swain Field in Toledo. And there was also a ritual connected with that, because a lot of times we would get there early during batting practice. And one of the elements of that was you could stand behind the right field fence. And during batting practice, there would be a certain number of balls that would come over. Oh, yeah, there'd be kids out there with gloves, and we'd take our gloves and try to catch a few before the game started.
I have a pet peeve with people that go to ball games and don't get there early enough for warm-ups, don't get there early enough for batting practice. They start arriving in the first inning. Why go if you're not going to go and enjoy the thing? Get there early, watch batting practice, get your drink and everything ahead of time. If you're going to a football game, get there while they're still doing their drills and their exercises. And that whole atmosphere of the teams getting ready for the game, to me, is just as enjoyable as the game itself. And it's kind of interesting now, taking my son and daughter to ball games. I'm constantly finding myself saying the same things to them that I recall my father whispering into my ear. Very much deja vu.
Yes, it gets carried on in the family traditions. There's a couple things you mentioned there that I wanted to bring up. One about your own mother, of not being terribly into it and so on. Of course, that wasn't the case in my family. It seemed like everybody was in it, including my mother, and she'd often be out watching the games when I was playing myself, so she was herself a fan. But I know that there would be a lot of people who, in their real struggle in life, is to live with a fan. They have to live with somebody who's a fanatic about athletics and figure out how to make that. Yes, how to make all of that work. I think that is, well, of course, we've often talked about golfing widows. The golfers are out there playing. And also the same thing goes, I suppose, in families where one of the other spouses is greatly into the sports. I know another family where it's the woman who's very much into the sports, and the husband really doesn't want to watch it on television, so she's got the games on, and he's trying to figure out how to blend into all of that.
My Aunt Helen may have been one of those. Fanatical Milwaukee Braves fan, totally crushed when the team left. And I was very young when the team did leave, and I don't remember them leaving, but I remember her talking about how she used to go to the games. We'd drive up to Milwaukee, and if anybody would bring up baseball, it would kind of bring a somber mood upon her. And finally they got, I guess, the old Seattle Pilots moved back into Milwaukee as the American League Milwaukee Brewers. Mm-hmm. And she was once again rejuvenated by having a team in town. And I visited her at a nursing home shortly before she passed away. And my wife had not met her. And we went up there to visit and went into the room, and she's lying in the bed, couldn't move around very much. And there on the radio, right by the bedside, was the Brewers game in progress. And she could tell me everything about what was going on and would get upset about calls that she could not even see but could only hear. Upset with the umpire's calls.
It's amazing. What comes to me as you're talking there, too, is the bonding that occurs. And, I mean, I know that happened with your father, and it happened with my father as well. It was a bonding that happened when you went to the games together. There was sort of an in-language that you used, and you could talk later on about the particular plays of the games. I remember my father taking me to high school baseball games in the city of Toledo. And, there'd be very few fans there, but he loved to watch. And that was a time when he sort of instructed me. Like, he would explain the game to me, probably more so than if we would go to a major league game in Detroit. And he would explain, what the players were not doing right and what he liked about them. And my father was a former catcher, so he was especially interested in the play of the catchers, as I recall, mm-hmm. and somewhat critical of their what they were doing very often. So it became sort of a common language, a set of symbols that bind people together. And I think that probably when you went to visit your aunt like that, I mean, that becomes the touch point for the conversation, doesn't it? You can walk in
and things started.
You got the ball game on. What's the score? How they doing? You think they're going to make it all right this year? What's so-and-so hitting? And it becomes a way of interacting, I think, and bonding.
My fondest memories of my father, who passed away when I was 16, almost all revolve around going to Sox games. And last year, going for my final time to the old Comiskey Park with my son and daughter, and I went with my brother as well. It was a very eerie feeling, and it is almost as if it is a cathedral. It is the one place where I feel closest to my father when my son is on my lap. And I'm explaining about all the great players that the Chicago White Sox have these days. And I can remember sitting on the third base side one of the last times I went with my dad as a youngster. And we usually went to doubleheaders because in 1960, I believe it was, they put in the exploding scoreboard. It was a big innovation.
Was that Bill Veeck there at that time?
It might have been. May have been John Allen. I'm not quite sure who the owner was in the 1960, but they put in the exploding scoreboard. It was going to be, but of course, the leading home run hitter on the White Sox, would have like 15 home runs or something. So like it almost never went off. Almost always they would hit these on the road, and never at home because it was a very big ballpark. And it was getting down late in the ball game. We're playing the Yankees. We're beating them soundly, as any good team should. And Pete Ward comes up, and my father said, "You better move down a few rows here so you get a good view of the scoreboard when it goes off." And I believed him, I believed everything my father said, so I went down, and indeed the next pitch was launched by Pete Ward, one of the all-time, Hawaii, he's not in the Hall of Fame, I don't know, reached the upper deck in right field. For one of his rare home runs.
But your faith in your father was magnified so many times over.
I'm scared to do that with with Ryan and the current crop of White Sox, because they indeed do not have someone that's quite capable of that.
That's right. Your youngsters might lack trust in you if you're wrong about that. I can remember a very similar thing. I was at Tiger Stadium with my dad, and at that I used to latch on to particular players that I would become fans of. The first one I can remember is Vern Stevens. He was a shortstop for the St. Louis Browns, and I would get up every day and look in the paper to see how many hits he got, and I even remember even keeping a chart where I would then figure out his batting average for that day. That was before the days of USA Today when they got the automatic batting averages as part of the box score now. But in those days, then I would figure it out to see what he was hitting, and as part of my morning routine. But I remember being at the Tiger Stadium, and I was a great fan of Joe DiMaggio. I loved the way he played center field. I loved his graceful movements and the way he stood at the plate. And I would always read every article in the sports magazines I could find about it. We got there to the game, and I remember in the very first inning, and I said, it suddenly dawned on me, he might have a bad game. He might not get a hit. And I turned to my dad. I says, Dad, I don't know if he's going to get a hit. I don't think he's going to get any hits today. My dad says, Joe DiMaggio will get some hits today. And the first time up, he hit a single to left field, and my faith in my father was well established at that point, too. And I thought, yeah, you're right. He did come through. So it's as you say, again, connected in with all those little traditions that probably are built up in family life as well.
Do you feel going to different ballparks that you get a different feel? I've been to the Houston Astrodome, and many times, because I lived in Texas for about 4 years, and would always go to a game during the opening series because they would give away a baseball cap, and then I would go 3 or 4 other times during the season, and the feeling there is really quite different than in ballparks that are not covered.
I know. I did. I went to the Seattle Kingdome once. It's the only time I've ever been in a ballpark that was domed. And it was eerie to me. I felt like I was in another century. You'd hear this voice coming out of the sky announcing things, and up above were these sort of wire baskets, I take it, that were protecting microphones or lights or something. I really
Might have
don't
been
remember.
In the Astrodome, they protect the speakers, which actually hang
Yeah, it's
from
okay.
the...
I think that must have been it. But anyway, in one of them, there was a baseball up there that somebody had maybe hit in during batting practice. But it was eerie. I mean, there was also the situation, it seems to me, where they could actually touch the top of it with a very high pop foul, and the infielder would have to, or the catcher going after a pop foul would have to maneuver to catch it after it would hit something up there. So I mean, it was eerie. It seemed the word that kept coming to me was antiseptic. I kept contrasting it with the Detroit Tiger Stadium, where whenever I did go to a major league game growing up, it was mostly there, and it was old and it was dirty, and you had to park a ways away and walk. When we went to the Seattle thing, we drove right up to the stadium. There was hardly anybody there. You parked real close.
Yeah, that's Seattle.
Yeah, right. Just walked in, and everything was clean and perfectly neat, and the rows were all in order, and there was no obstruction. You could see everything, and I really didn't like it, frankly. It was not a happy experience in that way. It wasn't what baseball was supposed to mean to me. I'm very traditional. A lot of people think theologically, that I'm sort of liberal. I'm not. I'm really moderate down the middle, but some people think I'm sort of liberal. But when it comes to baseball matters, I seem to be extremely conservative. I like them to play baseball in the sunshine and on the grass, and I really didn't like the Dome Stadium at all.
I enjoyed Houston, but I think I enjoyed it as an adult because you could go there and have nachos, and almond and wine would be served. In the mid-level, the first time I went, I didn't know what gate to go in to sit any place. I just went in the first gate, and it ended up, I thought, boy, it doesn't cost very much to go here. And I was in center field. That's why I went in the center field.
In the bleachers.
I was in the bleachers. And I was really far away, and the scoreboard was like right behind me. And at that time, it was an animated type of scoreboard, not a diamond division. And they would have this little cartoon character, Chester Charge, that would do his thing whenever there would be a hit. And you'd have to turn around and look up at this thing,
yeah.
And you couldn't see what was going on because you were too close to it. I since learned that if you sit in the middle level, the loge level at the Astrodome, that they have about a 6-row section, and they have waitresses that will come by and serve your drinks and bring your nachos, and that was quite nice.
Yes, I'm sure. That's a very different
My wife
experience.
enjoyed going there.
Yeah.
She did enjoy going there.
That was different. Yeah, it was a
different
kind of event. I happened on a couple of occasions as an invited guest to be the guest of Tom Monahan up in Detroit and to sit in his private box. And it had that kind of flavor as well. I mean, it's enclosed. There's food there and waiters and drink available and
well,
and
give me
all
a call
of that.
next time
that I'm
you got my
going. You
number.
want to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's an experience, and I mean, obviously, I was grateful to those who invited me to do that. But on the other hand, it blocks out the crowd noise. It's an enclosed box, and it really, is I didn't like it that much. It's a perfect seat, and you can see well, and there's monitors in the closed-in box, so you can watch replays and so on of what's happening. But it has that antiseptic feeling again. You're not part of the crowd. You're not into the action, and I really did not like it that much either.
I'm looking forward to going to see the Sox in the new stadium and see if they've been able to recapture the old field, but with a newer ballpark. I think that other places that I've been have had a hard time doing that kind of thing. I've been to Riverfront Stadium.
Yes, I have too.
And Riverfront and the one in Pittsburgh are very similar. They're circular and they're built for multiple sports. And the seats are fine, and there's no obstruction there, but it is a little different than going to one of the older ballparks. You're going to love Boston when you get there.
I'm going to hope to go to Fenway Park. Yes, I've never been there, and hope to get a chance. I think it's part of it is having a distinctive kind of ballpark and getting attached to it. I'm thinking up in Tiger Stadium, for example. There's fans who are really fanatic about keeping the stadium. They don't want Tiger Stadium torn down. They don't want a new one built. They want to keep watching ball games there, and they're in a protest mode, trying to stop.
Well, that's not in bad shape. The Sox Park, they did not keep it up. Bill Veeck and John Allen, previous owners of the White Sox, didn't have a lot of money. Team wasn't doing particularly well from 1968 till almost the present. People were not coming out. It's not in a very good, safe neighborhood. That was my only surprise, is that they decided to build it where they did.
Right next to it, yeah.
Right next to it. I thought they would look for another location eventually. I think I was pretty sure they were going to keep it in Chicago, but I thought they would look for. There's an old rail yard just south of the Loop, which I thought is ideal for combination football, baseball stadiums, because they also need a new basketball stadium, something fierce.
Well, I remember being in Comiskey Park one time too, and it was. I was struck by the largeness of the playing field again, but I don't know that the dimensions are really that big. Weren't they about 350 down the line, something like that? And
353 down the line.
They always talk about Tiger Stadium as being a great hitter's ballpark and many home runs there, and it's true because of the configuration of the stadium, especially in right field, because the upper deck reaches out closer to the playing field than the lower deck.
A ball could actually come down that would be playable, but it hits that and it's gone.
The outfielder could have caught, yeah. But on the other hand, in center field, it's 440 feet straightaway center field, and that has created for a lot of people, those large center fields have created some of the great moments in sports again. I remember seeing some great catches in Tiger Stadium, and then a lot of us fans have images of Willie Mays making a great catch. Was that in a World Series game with his back off Vic Wertz and going away in dead center field and catching the balls? I guess the Polo Grounds, which I was never there. It was at Ebbets Field once where the Brooklyn Dodgers played. That had a special character for sure. Really rapid fans, as I recall. I mean, they were really into it. But what I was saying is the configuration of the ballparks at times has given a special prominence to things. I mean, they've had short right field lines, and there's been hitters who could pull the ball down the line, hit a lot of home runs. You had in Yankee Stadium traditionally the great long left center field. I mean, Joe DiMaggio, they figured, would have hit another 100 home runs, I suppose, if he had played in a different ballpark. That he was playing there with that tremendously deep power alley in left center.
I was wondering, when they build new stadiums, why no one ever kind of took the old stadium configurations in mind in terms of the lines.
Well, I think Yankee Stadium is one that did. They did try to keep that general
when they renovated
idea in Yankee Stadium, in the renovation,
But the newer ballparks are all symmetrical.
Yes.
Right, left field line, power alleys, center field, pretty much a gradual movement out there. I guess Baltimore is going to be the next city that gets a new stadium. I think this is the last year they're going to be playing in Memorial Stadium.
Mark, we've been talking a lot about baseball, being baseball fans, and I wonder if we detect any sort of differences in in going to different sports. I was thinking of the pro football fans, and of course the image that comes to my mind are the in Cleveland, the dog pond and so on. It gets pretty rowdy, and football being a different kind of game, a more violent game, and it all is compacted and happens quickly, and you only play, 14, 16 games in a season where you're playing 162 in baseball. There's a very different kind of feeling. If you go to a baseball game and your team loses, it's generally not the end of the world unless you're down to the last week of the season and you're in title contention. I mean, because you win some, lose some. You know, the best of teams only win 100 games out of 162. You lose 62 times during the year. And so it sets a mood for a fan. I mean, to me, baseball is a long-term game. It's you got to make it over the long haul. And so if you lose a game, you say, well, it's all right.
You pick yourself up. And
we get them tomorrow. But in football, you lose a couple games at the beginning of the season, and it's over. You know, you're not going to make the playoffs.
I think another thing that's different about football, again, particularly in our family, you did not get a chance to go to football games the way you could go as a family to baseball games. You only had, back then, maybe 6 home games.
Right.
The Bears were playing in Wrigley Field, so you were in a very small facility, and the ticket prices, because of those few games, were so much higher than baseball ticket prices. I think it's the one thing that worries me most about baseball are the escalating ticket prices, not allowing fans to go to games.
Right. And kids will not have that experience then that you had with your father and that I had. I mean, I think that is really a shame. And you notice around the Major League ballparks, I think very often minority groups are not well represented at the games.
And in basketball, you look at the Detroit Pistons are playing in the Palace of Auburn Hills.
Yes.
Even Joe Louis Arena, compare that to the old Olympia Stadium, it's like a palace. Yeah. In many respects, for the people to go to see hockey. And the prices of some of those sporting events are almost out of reach for many of the average homeowners.
That's right. I don't know what it costs to see a Pistons game. Of course, you can't get in anyway. I don't think it's always sold out. But you're right.
Those are kind of sports that maybe if you do spend time with family and friends, it's more of a television, radio kind of thing where you are at home or you listen to the games while you're out doing some yard work or something. You do it more in that kind of atmosphere than actually going to the sporting events. And I think that makes a little bit of a difference in whether you become a fanatical follower of a particular team, although I'll follow them all anyway.
Yes.
But
that's a good observation, the difference between watching on television and watching at the game. I mean, there's a lot of times that if a Tiger game is on television and you know, I have tickets to go up to the game or something, I mean, I want to go up there. It has a whole different flavor to me. And,
absolutely.
And it's a very different kind of experience to be actually at the ballpark. And I think it probably goes in a lot with what you were saying before about the tradition that's built up in families or how you've gone before or the memories that it brings back.
And another thing that kind of irritates me, if I want to get irritated about stuff, the people that will not go to Mud Hen games or UT Rocket sporting events, they have been in town all of their lives and they haven't taken their children out to these events. They don't cost that much. Particularly the hens, where you're not even paying to park.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity missed every time a season goes by and those fathers and mothers haven't taken those kids out and had those kind of pleasant experiences. And even if the team loses or even if the weather turns a little bit inclement, you can still have a good time, and it's just that time to share and be together that's kind of important. And I feel it's lost from a lot of people around here even when teams are doing well, even sometimes you do not see big crowds out at games.
Mean, that really is a shame. I agree with you, and I have a special feel for that in going to Mud Hen games as growing up and so on. I think the major leagues have ruined the market through television for minor leagues, although there's a revival right now of interest in minor league baseball.
I don't blame TV. I blame the families.
Yeah.
I think there's more family life than television that's ruined that kind of.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that it's a matter of what you value. And a lot of times I'll tell people, instead of getting into a frenzy even of saying like we got to drive up to Detroit, spend this extra money, watch the ball game there, why not go to a Sandlot game in town or go to the Mud Hens game? or go to a UT Rocket sporting event. I think that's true. And it's a more leisurely matter. Usually the parking isn't as difficult, and it is a chance, again, as I think my father used it, as an opportunity to sort of instruct me, probably not only about baseball or the sporting event, but also about life. I think it had something to do with that. That's the point I'm getting out of your comments, too, that
Absolutely.
It's got a lot to do with values and what we really treasure in life.
I think that you can learn a lot from losing. 1967 was a great
year.
Well,
as a Chicago fan, you had a lot of opportunity.
A lot
of
experience. Wasn't a big Cub fan, so that didn't bother me so much. In fact, I rather enjoyed the downfall of the Cubs in the late 50s and early 60s when they had attendance down around 1 or 2,000 for some games. I rather enjoyed that. But 1967, the White Sox were in the thick of a pennant race with Detroit, Minnesota, and Boston, and lost out the final week of the season. I was kind of crushed, but I thought, well, we're going to get them next year. We made a big trade to get a player from Tommy Davis from the New York Mets. Had hit 300. We thought, this guy's going to play center field for us. It's going to be great. He's going to hit 30 home runs, 300. Had a terrible year. 1968, we lost over 100 games. And all the people, I used to keep scraps on things, and it was kind of depressing to hear the losing, but you learn to still follow them and still believe despite defeat.
Yeah, there's another one of the lessons. Of course, people who aren't sport fans, Mark, they think, well, what is all this? People are carried away. I think people get similar experiences in other ways. There'll be family bonding around going to a concert. There'll be family bonding around picnics and so on. For us, a lot of that has occurred, however, precisely through the world of athletics. And I think the point you brought out that touched me most deeply was when you said you were taking your own youngsters to the ball game and then remembering how it was when you were there with your father. And I think there is a sort of generational thing, a passing on of a heritage in all of this. It really is a beautiful thing. There are important values there, as you suggested, dealing with defeat and also knowing how to celebrate victories. So let's hear it for the fans, Mark. It's a great sort of thing that we have here, to be able to root for our teams and enjoy some fellowship in doing it.